Welcome, everyone, to another Facebook Sports Talk New York Live edition. Thrilled today to have this man joining us. He played 8 seasons in the National Hockey League for the Hartford Whalers, Washington Capitals, New York Rangers, Toronto Maple Leafs. After his playing career, he served as a hockey analyst for Sportsnet in Canada, as the co-host for Hockey Central. He also co-hosted Hockey Central at noon on the Fan 590 in Toronto. Also part of the new but revamped Hockey Night in Canada, the show he grew up watching as a kid. He joins us now to talk about his great new book, Undrafted: Hockey, Family, and What It Takes to Be a Pro. It is a thrill to welcome a member, and every time I get to say this, I smile, of the 1994 New York Rangers Stanley Cup champion team, New York Ranger Nick Kypreos, the Sports Talk Facebook Live. How you doing, Nick?
I'm well. How are you? And thank you for having me. Good morning.
It's my pleasure having you. And like I said, anytime I can say those words, having been a Rangers season ticket holder and sat through those games, it just brings back so many great memories. So first off, thanks for that, for sure.
Well, it's we're about a year and a half now out of a 25th anniversary reunion that we had, and it was fantastic seeing everybody. We missed Alex Karpatsev, who we lost in a horrific a tragic plane crash in Russia, but his family was well represented there. And it seemed like yesterday seeing all those guys once again. We're a little wider, a little grayer, but the stories were told like they happened yesterday.
I'll tell you, when you guys say you're a little older, a little wider, I was down there when you guys were doing that photo shoot and you guys were all, grabbing your jerseys from the rack. And you know what? Age is, you guys all have aged well. I mean, Mess looked like he could have, gone out there that day. Laidlaw is an absolute beast these days. But you guys all looked the same. It was really strange.
Well, I think it's just generational. I remember growing up when I saw a dad that was 45 or 50. That was an old man. And now, as they say, the 50 might be the new 40 or even younger. And we do feel that way. In many ways, we're still kids. We're still fortunate to have played a kid's game as an adult and made a living for it, and carved out a lovely path, for our lives. And I still benefit it to this day, being a Stanley Cup champion. And once you have that label, you have it the rest of your life. And I try to bring a little bit of that into the book. So that's where we're at.
The book is absolutely outstanding, and it's a great read. You really get to know you as well as your roots through this book. It's interesting that your co-author, Perry Lefko, also co-authored your 94 teammate Eddie Olczyk's book. How did the idea of the book come about, and what was the process that you and Perry went through?
Well, that's a real interesting question. And to be honest, people have said you should write a book, but that was over like 6 beers and a good buzz. You never take it seriously. And then Perry came up and really said, I think you have a wonderful story to tell, not only the hockey story, but the broadcasting one too, at 21 years with Sportsnet. And he said, give it a real good thought. And at that point, he had just finished his book with Eddie Olczyk. And of course, Eddie and I are lifelong friends because of the 94 Stanley Cup. And I knew that, if Eddie trusted Perry to go down that path, I could look at it and give it some serious thought. And it really came to the thought process that it was a good time to do it now. That I closed a chapter in broadcasting for over 20 years. You want to go and tell stories while they're still fresh in your mind, while you're still have the energy to tell them. And it was a good time. So after some soul searching, talking to my wife, my kids, they said, "Go for it, Dad." And that's where we are today.
Having done books in the past myself, including 4 hockey books that I was lucky enough to have Jiggs McDonald, Kenny Albert, Dave Maloney, and Ryan Callahan do the forwards, I know how important that is to setting the tone. And I know you had Doug on the other day and you kidded with him that, you went down the list and, finally he said yes. But obviously that's not the case. How important was it for you to have Doug set the tone of the actual book?
Well, there's not too many people that overlap both sides of my post-hockey career. So he is one of them. And, our interaction at an my early age of 22, 23 years, and breaking into the NHL and having him a part of the Washington Capital organization. He was going through some changes as well, because we went through the brother change of head coach Brian Murray to his brother Terry, which, I talk about in the book being one strange scenario, watching a brother take over another brother's head coaching job. But Doug's the kind of guy that I got to know a lot more when I spent some time with him in Baltimore in the American Hockey League, the farm team for the Washington Capitals, where I went down there to kind of find my game again. I just had some minor surgery and I needed to gain some confidence. And I just remember more mentally what Doug was able to do for my confidence to get back into a position where when I got recalled in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I was able to come in and contribute right away with a hard forecheck and beat the New York Rangers and get to a conference final for the first time in franchise history. And then the moment that I found out that Doug MacLean was available after leaving the Columbus Blue Jackets after a very long run as president and general manager, I told Sportsnet, we got to go get this guy. We got to bring him in. He's perfect for us. He's got not only the experience as an executive, but he's a good guy and he's fun, and we can have great energy out of Doug MacLean. And there he was again with me for 10 more years at Sportsnet. And of course, we had a historical show called Hockey Central at Noon that took a life of its own on. And I'm kicking the can for the third time, as I invited him to do a podcast and a YouTube channel called Real Kipper at Noon on linemovement.com that we're presently running right now. So I hope I'm 3 for 3 with Doug MacLean, but he was kind enough to do the forward for me. And I just felt that there wasn't a better person that knew me as a player and a broadcaster. And he's the only person that really saw both sides of it.
Truly a natural hat trick with him. Given the current state we're in, where the importance of family has been first and foremost in everyone's lives now, the way you talk about your family in the book is so touching. As you say that your family was like the family in the big fat Greek wedding, just bigger, fatter, louder, and more Greek. But your family really was such an important part of your journey, whether it be your sister, Stell, who was basically your first shooter tutor, or your sister Tess, who kept you out of trouble,
Yes.
or your parents who instilled that strong work ethic in you. Can you share a little bit about the dynamic of your family and what it meant to setting the foundation for you?
Yeah, well, I try to capture it from the very beginning, and my dad's destination from a small town in Greece called Sparta, and coming over, and then getting to work. And, landing in Halifax and not even having enough money to get to Oshawa, which he thought was a mere couple of hours away, ended up being, almost like another country away. And just his ability to get to work, find a way to put some money in his pocket, as little as it was back then, and then slowly build to the point where he could bring a brother over and then another brother over from Greece, and then be in a position to bring his mom over. And just that whole feeling of family is everything. And I was able to kind of pick that up in an early age. It was all about opportunity. My dad, to this day, God bless him, at 86 years of age, still says we live in the best country in the world, of the best of opportunities. And he'll never take that for granted. But my dad, it was always about instilling a work ethic, never having your hand out, always hoping to get the opportunity to prove yourself, and then waiting for good things to happen to you. And I've tried to instill that, in sports, the way I played the game, the way I developed the mindset. And it wasn't easy. It's very notable in the book how many times I had to fall down before I got up. Yeah. And in many ways, my dad did as well. And the challenges of being an immigrant in North America, and the feeling that you are a little bit different than everyone else, but it's okay, because it's your culture, it's your family, it's your beliefs, it's your morals, it's your values. and it's okay. And at times you doubted it a little bit, but you stuck to it. And he says ever since he landed in North America, that he's had a great life because he took that chance. And I try to tell that story at the very beginning, and how it laid the foundation for me to say it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up. And I think it's fairly consistent, I think, from his generation to mine.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that immigrant story, because, in reading it, and you transferred the big Greek, wedding to your family. Even reading it, when you talk about some of the Greek traditions, like spitting 3 times in the Jewish, or pretty much the Yiddish tradition, it's kinehara poo poo poo, same thing, 3 times.
Sure.
But and also the way basketball was a way for the Eastern European Jews to assimilate in New York. I've read so many different stories, whether it be Kevin Weeks, PK Subban, or Ty Domi. Hockey was the way they, immerse themselves into the culture. How important was hockey for you to immerse yourself in the culture and to feel part of a community?
Well, I do speak of that through my first experience of going to an NHL game. And again, here in the Toronto area, it didn't matter whether it was the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, or 2020. Tickets are hard to come by. And I only was able to kind of connect with the Toronto Maple Leafs through my dad's black and white television while I watched him, watching the game. And then to find out that he came home with a pair of tickets and I was going to go see my first game was like a magic moment that I still feel like it happened yesterday for me. And it's closing in on 50 years ago. Wow. So it was an absolutely incredible experience. And I said for the first time when I left it, I probably felt more Canadian than I ever did up until that point. And, I was a Greek kid growing up in Toronto, but that night I felt a little Canadian leaving Maple Leaf Gardens. And it was just a fantastic experience. And knowing that, the other thing is you can have the best of both worlds. You can be Canadian, you can be Greek at the same time. And one doesn't have to take a back seat to the other. They're equally there for you the rest of your life. And that's the great part about being a family, that you don't have to limit yourself to one family. You can have friends who feel like family. You could have coworkers that feel like more than just coworkers. It's a beautiful world, and you soak up as much as you can.
And it really clearly comes through in the book. You talk about some of the travel teams you played on, tournaments. Having coached my son in both hockey and baseball, I look back on those days and the bus trips with such fond memories. We had the advantages of VCRs on buses, so we got to watch Slapshot, Miracle, Field of Dreams on trips. I couldn't help but laugh at the visual you create, and I would actually consider this interview a total fail if I didn't call you on this. So you actually stated that you and your teammates knew all the words to the Bay City Rollers song Saturday Night.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to give me a little bit.
Well, we got the SATURDAY night. Oh gosh, you're killing me now. Saturday night, rocking all around. Oh God, listen, I've been concussed 6 times over my career, and that was when we were that's when we were 7. It was a novice team, and we were going up to North Bay, which I ended up in junior years later as a junior A player, but you're the first one that's ever done that to me. And if you gave me about a good 5 minutes, which we don't have, thank God, I would come up with a few more lyrics.
You're going to call me later and say, you SOB, now I have an earworm of that song in my head all day long. All right. So,
Oh
all
my
right.
God.
All right. So you
Hey,
get
at
offered.
least I can still spell it.
There you go. And I love the fact that you played the concussion card to get out of it. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Well played.
Exactly. All right. So you get an offer to a scholarship to Princeton, but your heart was set on playing junior hockey. But you note that if you had that option again, it would be hard to refuse an Ivy League scholarship. So what went through that choice back then? Was there conversations with your family? Why the junior route? As opposed to Princeton.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I talk a lot about in my book where really the temperature of the water was with playing professional hockey. And at that point, it was just my dream to play in the NHL. And it just seemed that the route was felt a lot, it felt more real to go through the junior A ranks when you've watched constant players come out of the OHL and the Western Hockey League, of course, and we had the third league as the Quebec Major Junior A out east. But it just seemed like it was very hard for players to come out of the college ranks and play in the National Hockey League. And of course, in the 80s, we saw the miracle in Lake Placid, and a lot of those guys were college players. And it started to open up a little bit, but not enough for me to definitively say that, you go play college for 3 or 4 years, you're going to come out and there's going to be an NHL contract waiting for you. It just seemed at the time that for a development of your game, the best route to go was the CHL. And of course, the numbers still support it. We're in 2020, and there's no question that the numbers still support the CHL, our major league here in Canada. But certainly no one believes for 1 second that it's one or the other. You have a terrific shot of still going the college route, getting an education, or at least starting one. And we still see the very good players that are ranked amongst the top amateurs in the world leave college early. To return, I don't know what the rate is on that, but you have your options. You could turn pro still at 19 or 20 and leave college, or you can finish your term and turn pro after that. There's more options than ever before for kids, as it should be. But for me, it really was leaning towards playing major junior A. And the other thing too is, you're in another country, you're far away from your family. I've been very clear in the book how close of a family we were. I remember being 3.5 years in junior up in North Bay, and my mom and dad would drive almost everywhere to watch me. And I can't tell you how great it felt to have that support team around you while you try to fulfill a dream.
It's also interesting because you're eligible for the 1984 draft, the same draft year that Mario Lemieux gets drafted number 1. A couple of interesting notes. Eddie Olczyk goes 3rd overall. 2 guys with the Ranger roots that don't play a single NHL game are the current New York Ranger head coach David Quinn, went 13th. Islanders took Duncan McPherson 20th. On top of those 2, you played more games in the NHL than 5 others taken in that first round. Take me back to that draft day, the phone call you get from Bobby Clark the next day.
Well, first of all, we didn't know a lot about the pro league up until that point, and I had already played in major junior A, and maybe that's just us blindly going through life. But we knew enough to say that if no one has approached me to represent me as an agent, and no one's really put the bug in our ear that you could get drafted, why are we going? And we didn't go. And I do believe that maybe we had the top 10, or maybe even 15. I don't even know if they covered the first round on TV. There certainly wasn't enough. There was no internet. There's no way to keep up to what was happening at the time. So I do remember watching on TV and Mario not getting up after he was drafted to go to Pittsburgh's table. And of course, history will show us that Mario knew the value of Mario back then. And we know how it turned out great for him and Pittsburgh all these years later. But I just knew not to go. And I do remember, in the book talking about looking at the list the next day. You had to wait for the list the next day in the paper to find out who went where and how many rounds they went. And you kept constantly seeing names going, I think I can be better than him, or, I could be better than him. So there's a lot of motivation going into my second year. And that's when you mentioned that the call out of the blue for Bob Clark with the Philadelphia Flyers, and he had just transitioned from playing to general managing. So he was still a star, and we just had stars in our eyes. And, having my sister answer the phone and telling me it's Bob Clark from the Philadelphia Flyers, and not believing her, and why are you teasing me, and, why are you poking the bear right now? And took a while to kind of believe it, and just feeling like perhaps you're getting the opportunity of a lifetime, a dream come true. You're going to go to a Stanley, or you're going to go to an NHL team that's trying to win a Stanley Cup. And, didn't matter if you were a first rounder or the very last pick, or you're invited like I was as a free agent, you're still going to be on the ice competing like everyone else. It was a fantastic feeling.
And again, for me, it's so cool the way you almost every moment, big time moment, you relate back to your family, and just the way your dad broke down Philadelphia. Is just like, he could be an NHL commentator. He could take over for Doug Emmerich. Tell us, how your dad broke down Philadelphia to tell you.
Well, first of all, it felt more like a scene out of My Big Fat Greek Wedding than anything else. And of course, Philadelphia is it's a Greek word. Philos, brotherly love, comes from friendship. And my dad starts giving me a bit of a history lesson on the Greek word philos. So I'm like, Dad, am I going or I'm not going? What's the deal here? I'm lost. You're my agent right now. He said, yes, we're going to go. If you want to go, you go. It's my dad opportunity was never lost on my dad. Like I said, he never had his hand out for anything. But he knew of opportunities and a chance to go and prove yourself and work hard. And he welcomed that opportunity for me on that day.
So in getting ready for this interview, I was torn between which jersey to wear. One of my many of 100 Ranger jerseys, or the Hershey Bears. And
I like it, by the way.
I had to go with the Hershey Bears because one of my favorite lines in the book was the fact, that your first pro team, you said that it's not a good stat when you have more root canals than points. And it's like, that's it right there. You never play a game as a Flyer. You're claimed off waivers by the Caps, and as fate has it, you make your NHL debut wearing number 9 versus the Flyers. So tell us about that experience, and then getting to play your first game against the team that you were a part of for over 3 years.
Well, first of all, you're not the first person to bring up that line that you should have more root canals and points in your career so far. And I speak of that night I lost 5 teeth on one single play and going through 5 root canals in a single night. And by the way, until someone proves me otherwise, that's a AHL record right there.
Absolutely. Never be broken either.
Yeah. But another example, I think, in the book of finding ways to kind of take 2 steps back, for 3 forward. So it ended up well enough where I was able to kind of rebuild my confidence again on another opportunity to go back to training camps in Philadelphia and be in a position where I was a legitimate prospect for them. I speak so highly of Tim Kerr in that organization, who kind of took me under his wing and I trained with him. We were both hurt. I blew out my knee. He had shoulder injuries, and just getting myself in an opportunity to play for the Philadelphia Flyers, which I had worked, 5 years of putting in time and effort and chances to refine my game in North Bay. And then with one single moment, the second phone call that I got out of Bobby Clarke was, I'm sorry to say, but we lost you on waivers. You're gonna go to Washington. And it's such a great moment and disappointing moment at the same time, because your first thought is, I'm going, if I got claimed on waivers, I'm going to play in the NHL, because Bobby Clarke said, listen, if they don't play you and they try to send you down to the minors, I'll reclaim you. So I was fortunate enough to say, I'm going to get a chance to play in the NHL for the first time. My dream's going to come true after all these years and all those setbacks. And the other one was, well, I'm not going to do it for the Philadelphia Flyers, which kind of makes me a little sad, because I've built up so many great relationships with these people, and they stuck with me all this time, all these injuries. And yet they said, we're still waiting for you, which was a miracle in itself. And that would never happen today. You would never have a guy in the same organization without playing in the NHL for 5 years, with the constant buildup that I had after so many setbacks. So that was a little disappointing, but sure enough, I go and start with the Washington Capitals in my first games against these guys that I've lived with, ate with, trained with, rehabilitated with, the Philadelphia Flyers. That opening game, it was a hard game to play. It was a great game to play, a great memory, but also a hard one. I mean, it's easier to get in the face of a team that you don't know than one that you do. But great feeling to finally know that your dream's going to come true that night in your first NHL game.
You eventually become a New York Ranger, but you actually have to wait to play for them because you're serving a suspension. But there's subtle ways that you can fit in even before your first shift. And one of those happened, might have gotten you a few extra nights sitting up with the Black Aces. Tell us a little bit about the Mike Keenan red scarf story.
Well, Keenan had some class, in terms of the way he wanted to dress. He had a little GQ in him. So, every once in a while it was the crisp shirt, the designer jeans, the Italian shoes, and he needed to cut through our dressing room to get to his office. So we had a stretch that day, and he had a long red scarf around his neck, wrapped around his neck with the tail coming in the back. And, I'm such an idiot, but I grabbed one of practice socks, which was a bright red sock. It was just if you had to look twice to see the difference between his scarf and my red hockey sock. And I wrapped it around, and I followed him, right behind him. And I could hear the guy snickering, but Keenan, he's straight faced. He's heading towards the door, and then right at the last second, just stops. And there he gives it this one, and there I am, caught red-handed with the red scarf.
I love it.
And I'm like, and then the boys are like, "Hey, it was nice playing with you. I hope you get traded into our division so we can see you every once in a while."
You talk a lot about mess in the book, and one story that you chronicle that really emphasizes leadership skills. 2 weeks into your Ranger career, Mark takes you out to lunch, and you ask him a question about his Stanley Cup rings. Can you pick up that story? Because I just think it's mess in under a microscope. That's what leaders do.
Yeah. Well, we know that he came in with 5 Stanley Cup rings to his credit in Edmonton, and they were all spectacular. And maybe the one that probably stands out the most was the one that didn't include Wayne Gretzky. So, we know that when he came to the New York Rangers, he was the hired hitman to get a championship to the New York Rangers that they hadn't had at 53 years when he got traded to the Rangers, and then missing the playoffs, a bitter disappointment. And the feeling going into 94 was it has to be here and now. And bringing in Mike Keenan proved that. And, you know, the one thing that stood out really right from the get-go is that Mark didn't come to New York to remind people of those 5 championships. He came to New York to remind New York Ranger fans and the organization that it's all about the next one. It doesn't really matter about the 5. I will draw my experiences from the 5 and try to implement them in the room on a daily basis, but I'm not rubbing them in anyone's faces. They know they're there. I don't need to remind anybody about those Stanley Cups. So when I asked him why haven't I not seen him wear one of those championships rings, he had asked me where mine was, and I said I don't really have one. And at this point, you're wondering, is he mistaken me for someone else, or is he pulling my leg, or what's the deal? So I just answered him straight faced. I said, Mark, I don't have one. And he goes, well, listen, I'll wear my Stanley Cup ring when you can wear yours. And that's his mindset, that it's not about anything in the past. It's about the present, or looking at the immediate future and how great that future can be. So it's like 5 are forgotten. The only one that matters to me is the next one that we can do together. And that to me made me feel like I grew about 6 inches taller, and it really planted for me the first time that it doesn't have to be a dream. You don't have to dream of winning the Stanley Cup, that it's closer than that, but we got to do it together, and we got to make sure that we share that feeling amongst the 24 of us, including, of course, the Black Aces, that we remind everybody that it's just not a dream. It can be a reality, but we got to get to work. And I just felt like I was shot out of a cannon after that lunch.
And it's also interesting because you carry it a step further. You talk about getting off the bus for Game 6, and you and Leachy are the last 2 off the bus, and they're sitting on one of the empty seats is the post with, the Messier's picture, guarantee, Game 7. And, Leachy turns to you, and what does he say to you at that point?
I guess we're going to win.
Yeah.
It's just, he said that it was tongue in cheek, but like it also really gives you an idea of what a guy like Brian Leach thinks of Mark Messier, because in so many ways, what he said was gospel, and that's the way we took it. But it wasn't, it's not just a guy up there preaching. It's a guy that you believe in, that you say, okay, he's got the Cadbury secret, man, to championships, 5 of them. Why wouldn't I believe him? So that it wasn't just a tongue-in-cheek comment by Brian Leach on that bus. It was a really, really good feeling that if we just stick to the plan and we buy into it, then Mark knows. He knows that we're going to be fine, and he knows that we can come out of this on top if we just stick to the plan. And that, to me, when I knew Brian felt good, then I really knew that our team was in good shape. And Brian, God bless him, for the superstar he was and one of the greatest defensemen in history, sometimes the confidence would wander a little bit on Brian Leach. And I just knew when Brian said that, and that Mark reiterated to him that we're going to be fine, then Brian said we're going to be fine. When I heard Brian essentially tell me we're going to be fine, then I really knew we were going to be fine.
And you actually in the book point to that game as the most incredible game you've ever seen. For me, it's the Game 7 of that series. In fact, I don't know if you can see this, but I can no longer make a proper fist because there is a tremendous dent in section, which no longer there, section 331, row C, the seat in front of me, when Zalapukin scored.
Yes.
I punched that seat with Yeah, and that's the result, but it was worth it. but yeah, it's interesting that
That's
you
so
point to
funny.
that one as the most incredible game you've ever seen. Let's
Yeah.
fast forward to Game 7. The only lineup, and I'm talking Stanley Cup. The only lineup change is that you go in for Joey Kocur.
Yes.
You detail that game, how you try to hit everything in sight. How do you try to keep those emotions in check as the clock starts ticking down and it's a close game and it's right there. All your dreams are right there.
Yeah.
How do you rein that in to stay in control on the ice?
I think for the most part, it's just muscle memory, and you sometimes it's all an individual thing, but you can put compartments on certain parts of your game, and for some, it's 5 minutes, it's a period, or it's your next shift. And when I say muscle memory, at the end of the day, you can build up anything you want towards how great of a moment it can be and how this could be a defining moment in your life. And you can have a lot of that kind of overwhelm you. And then there's other parts where you can just say, hey, it's the same game you played since you were 7. Same offside, same blue line, same red line. And you let your instincts take over, and it's just the same game. And I think we were able to have that calming feeling because our team was so experienced at the time. And not only did we have Mark and Kevin Lowe, but then all of a sudden you turn around, there's Craig McTavish, there's Glenn Anderson, players that have been there and done that to calm you down. And I talk about Kevin Lowe in the book, and you mentioned the game going into overtime and how Kevin would just quietly tell everybody that, if it wasn't so damn hard, everybody would be doing it a lot more, winning championships. So, there was it's the fun part. It's the fun part of challenging yourself to find a way to come up big. And ultimately it really comes down to embracing the moment, enjoying it, and not letting it overwhelm you, because it is the same game that you played since you're 7. So go out there and let your instincts take over and make safe, sound decisions and take a deep breath. We had great experience, and I think it really was the difference between us and Vancouver winning a Stanley Cup.
It's also interesting because in the beginning of the book, you talk about George Dias, who was your cousin, and what a huge Ranger fan he was. And that you
George Dias, yes.
Dias.
Yes.
And you actually feel his presence,
Yes.
looking down on you with the cup, which sent chills. But you also make it your point to skate over to Steve and David Zaretsky, who have the famous sign, and actually his son Avery is a big fan of the show as well. Here he watches us, and his dad as well. Had that sign, "Now I can die in peace." Tell us a little bit about George and how you felt his presence. And what did the Zaretsky sign mean to you that you felt compelled to skate over?
Yeah. Well, first of all, in Canada, and this goes from my earliest ages, age of watching my dad fall in love with the game. It was basically the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Montreal Canadiens in Canada, right? They're the only 2 original 6 teams. And it was always a nice family rivalry between the two, because not everybody in Toronto were Maple Leaf fans. So, my cousin George was, I want to say, 6 years older than me. So out of the blue comes this New York Ranger fan, pardon the pun. But New York Rangers, why the New York Rangers? I like the colors. I like the uniform. It was, oh la la, Phil Esposito. They were kind of cool. Ron Duguay had the coolness going, and it just stuck with me, and how much he loved the New York Rangers. And if he was fortunate enough to get any tickets at all to go to a Leaf game, it was just about the New York Rangers. So that always stuck out in my mind. So the moment I got traded, of course, he was the first one that came to mind. My cousin's love for the New York Rangers and how he would have just loved to be in this moment. And unfortunately, we lost him to a drunk driver, when he was in his 20s. But it would have been a fantastic moment. But spiritually, I felt his presence that day particularly. And of course, for me to bring him up in my post-game interview with Hockey Night in Canada. So, just overall, the love of the New York Ranger fans, getting traded from Hartford to New York. I talk about my first walk in New York City, and a police officer pulling me over and scaring the crap out of me, only to find out that he held his hand out to wish me a warm welcome from a diehard New York Ranger fan. And so you inherit all of that the moment you become a New York Ranger. And on top of that was this 54-year drought that had been passed on from generation to generation. And that's what Now That I Can Die in Peace was all about. That sign single-handedly represented everybody in New York City.
Absolutely.
And it's just one of those moments where I've got the Stanley Cup, it's over my head, and for a split second, God bless those guys, everybody was gone. All I could see was that sign and what it represented to New York Ranger fans.
That is a cool story. So you have like so many of these full circle moments. You get to play for your hometown team, also the Maple Leafs. And I just want to touch on that really quickly. You could say, I know you have to go soon as well, but here in New York, we say the pressure of that curse and how it weighed on the team. And here in New York, we think we're the epicenter of everything. And obviously, we are not the epicenter of hockey.
That's what makes it New York City.
Right, I agree. And as much as I'd like to say that the New York Rangers are the epicenter of hockey, I know better. How much does and you talk about the fishbowl of being a Maple Leaf? How much of that fishbowl do you think adds to the pressure that the current Leafs and for the last 2-3 years, Maple Leaf fans had to think that this was their year, especially when you added JT. How much of that constant pressure adds to them not being able to finally get that next elusive cup?
Yeah, it's there and it's real. And it'll continue to be real as you continue to pick players that can't handle that to a certain degree. And, I'm not going to name names now because I don't want to, embarrass anybody, but there's been some exceptional hockey players that have come to Toronto and fell flat on their face for no other reason, not anything to do with their talent, but everything to do with not handling that fishbowl feeling of being watched over. And now that we've added this element the last 10 or 15 years called social media, it's actually made it even worse. And it's up to the management, it's up to ownership, just to find players that can handle it and overcome it and put it in its proper place. And to go back to Mark Messier, Mark had the mental strength to put a 54-year curse on his back and say, I'm not going to let it control me. I'm going to control it. And if you find enough of those players in a bubble like Toronto, then you will end up with a championship too. As long as, the talent's there along with that mental strength. But there's been too many players that have not been able to overcome that fishbowl mentality of being critiqued on a daily basis, and then sometimes hearing things that aren't favorable, to your ego. And until you find enough of those guys that say, I'm going to control the narrative, I'm not going to have the narrative control me, Toronto may struggle a little bit more.
So you go from the ice to the broadcast booth. Again, it's one of those things where, like you mentioned, and similar to, Rocky 5 or 6, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. You get fired. All right. But you end up having another one of those full circle moments. At the end, you're part of Hockey Night in Canada, the show you grew up on. Which of the two moments, putting on the hometown jersey of the team you grew up watching, or sitting on the set of Hockey Night in Canada, was that moment like, wow, I can't believe I'm here?
Are you asking me to pick my favorite child?
Yeah. You didn't know the words to Saturday night, so now, and you can't blame this on your concussion either, all right?
There's no one greater, honestly. There's no one greater, because they're both they're almost out of body moments, right? Surreal, and they're both great. If I had to pick one, I didn't dream about being on Hockey Night in Canada since I was 7. I was dreaming about being an NHL player who happened to be on Hockey Night in Canada. So it'll always be around playing the game. And I loved every moment of being on Hockey Night in Canada. I've loved every moment of broadcasting the Olympics in 2010 in front of a record audience here in Canada. But it always was about the love of the game, of playing it. And, if I had to tell you honestly, being an NHL player is the best job in the world, and the second best job in the world is being able to talk about it on television. So I feel like I've been blessed twice around the game of hockey. So that's what the book is really all about. It's about telling that story of having two dreams come true, in so many ways, and all about having your family around you to share it. It's you don't want to be that golfer who plays by himself, who gets a hole in one, then turns around and goes, okay, it's not fun if people aren't around you to enjoy it with you. So that's my book, with my family and playing in the NHL and then broadcasting as well.
So lastly, like I told you, I absolutely love the book. When
Thank
you and Perry set out to do this, what was the main thing you wanted the readers, to take away from it? And in the end, do you feel you've accomplished that? And are you pleased with everything in the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's no doubt that we're still in trying times. And, so many times people say NHL players have never had it better. The money's never been better. The notoriety's never been better. In many ways, they're right. But yet, as a member of the NHL alumni, and Glenn Healy, of course, a great New York Islander and teammate of mine with the New York Rangers, has done a wonderful job now as executive director of the NHL alumni. But we got a lot of sad stories out there still. And a lot of them, a few have been portrayed either publicly or in a book. But there's also ones, and many, that you don't know or hear about. And Glenn's doing his best chance, giving himself the best chance to help those through the alumni. But there's a lot of sad stories out there. I just wanted a book that said that, there are ways that it doesn't have to end up a tragedy or, on a sad note. And we have our challenges with, anxiety, depression, that can lead to drug and alcohol problems. And we need also stories to tell that, challenging times may be ahead of you, but you can still find ways to get to the same destination. It just might have to be a dirt road, Be great, wouldn't it be, to be those can't miss kids since you're 7. You're always on the best player on the team every year. You're going to be a first round pick. You're going to be a Hall of Famer. It's just, you don't know for sure, but it sure is leaning that way. But that's such a small percentage of a very small percentage. And then there's like the rest of us who, you know, the road isn't paved. It's dirt. It's a dirt road. And sometimes it can close off and you got to find a path less chosen, and you still find a way to get there. And I really hoped for you and anyone else that reads the book can get that out of the book, is that, you know, it doesn't have to end up with an ex-player sleeping under a bridge. But it takes, you know, a mindset. It takes a belief in you when maybe nobody else does believe in you. And that's okay, because you're the one that needs to look in the mirror every night. And that's what I hope that the book does when you pick it up and read it, that there are ways to take, like I said, a few steps back to gain many more forward.
Absolutely. Tal Zuckerman in the chat room said, love stories like yours. So glad you won the cup with our Rangers. How do I obtain a signed copy of your book? Where can people get a hold of it? Are there signed copies someplace as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough still. You know, of course, we're going through challenging times with the pandemic. I would love to be in New York right now at a bookstore signing, and maybe that'll come sooner than later. We all got our fingers crossed. But in the meantime, I am in the Toronto area. There are some bookstores, I think, in the Midtown, Young Eglinton area. I do go in there periodically and I sign books. And if you wanted to call them, there's Chapters Indigo, you know, in the Toronto area. I do pop in there every once in a while. I put my mask on. I go to the back. I sign a few of the copies. Maybe they can put one aside for you. Maybe mail one to you. But other than that, we just got to wait patiently until we can come into your area. And hopefully that'll happen sooner than later.
Nick, before I let you go, this is live, so I'm going to try this, but it might be a total
Not another
fail.
song.
Hold on. I'm going to try this, but it might be a total fail. But let's see how this works out. Alexa, play Bay City Rollers Saturday Night. Hold on.
What is she telling you?
Alexa, volume 11.
So we keep on dancing all through the night. Saturday night. Saturday night.
There we go. All right. So now this will be in your head
Not
all
bad.
day long.
Not bad. I gave you one verse.
Well, listen, spelling the word Saturday is not a verse. I'm sorry. All right, Nick.
Awesome.
Alexa, off.
It's just, you know, one other thing. I got to be able to plug my new ventures. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we took a year off a little bit. I wanted to come back. I didn't want to give up broadcasting totally. So as you can see, I'm on my set here. This is a set that I built in my home. It's linemovement.com. I've got a YouTube channel called Real Kipper at Noon. It's a playoff of Hockey Central at Noon, a show that I did for 15 years at Sportsnet with Doug McLean. It's been a lot of fun. We hope to go daily as early as the beginning of next season, which hope is around January. Got our fingers crossed. And then the other thing I wanted to do is get away from hockey completely. And we, my wife and I, with good friends, we launched a cocktail. It's a premium vodka, all organic, under 100 calories. It tastes great. It's pineapple and rosemary. We did it locally in Ontario for the LCBO, and it's been such a huge hit that we hope to expand it nationally next spring. And I so desperately want to bring it to New York. It's called Little Buddha.
Little Buddha. I'll tell you what. You know, I am not a big.
You're a beer guy.
Molson Golden. Absolutely. All right. So, but I will say this: the Ray Whitney vodka.
Yes.
You know, the Pink Whitney.
Whitney.
Oh, it's like I'm into that. So I need to get myself some Little Buddha.
If you like your lemonade, you're good there. This one's pineapple with a little grilled. It's grilled pineapple with a little bit of rosemary. So This one's a little more health conscious with the ingredients. All natural.
I love the fact that you pegged me as a beer guy. Love it. All right, Kipper. Thanks so much. Good luck with everything. Great book. Great
listen,
book.
love the time. Love sharing stories with you. Say hi to all my New Yorkers down there. Stay strong, and we're marching forward together.
And let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers. Thank you.
Be good, Nick. Thanks so much.